On the other line is Jason Hunter, who's a former international trade negotiator. Good morning to you, Jason.
Good morning to you.
So as you just heard from John Conway, the Vote Leave coordinator for South Bucks, there are other alternatives, and we shouldn't be worried about leaving on WTO rules.
Well, he's absolutely wrong. Our Secretary of State for International Trade was on the radio just this morning, and Liam Fox is saying it will be disastrous for the UK farming sector if we do that. I mean, the Article 24 thing is absolute rubbish. I mean, that was a piece of paper that Jacob Rees-Mogg whipped out of his pocket at some point in the past. But first of all, Theresa May yesterday is in the paper saying if we don't leave the European Union, it will be a catastrophic affront to democracy. Democracy, every single campaign group in the referendum in 2016 has been successfully prosecuted for breaking electoral law. There's been massive overspends by a number of organizations. We know there's foreign influence, certainly through social media, and there's a big question about where another £8.3 million came from. David Cameron is said to have said that World War III will start, and George Osborne said that we're going to have an emergency budget and the economy is going to die. Everybody lied. The leaders of the Leave EU campaign sat in a parliamentary select committee and gave legal evidence that they deliberately lied to their voters to get them to vote leave. The whole thing's being investigated by the National Crime Agency for the first time in British political history. If anybody thinks that that's democratic, they don't believe in democracy at all. So that's how we got here. Now, tomorrow evening, there will be a vote on Theresa May's deal. We know what Brexit is today. We've got 585 pages saying specifically what Brexit means for the United Kingdom. Nobody likes that. 17 million people definitely didn't vote for it. You can tell that by all the leaders of the various different campaigns who voted leave, who do campaign for leave. So that's not democracy to accept Theresa May's deal. 17 million people also did not vote for the hardest possible cliff edge Brexit of a no-deal Brexit, falling back onto WTO rules. So that wouldn't be democracy either. The only out that we have that's democratic is to rescind our intention to leave the European Union, take back Article 50, our invocation of Article 50, have a proper legal debate under British electoral law for a year or so. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure that everybody understands what's what. No lies, no fraud, no illegal funding, no foreign influence. Let's have a British debate about a British issue. And then if we decide at that point, once we know what's what legally, then we can have a referendum and decide whether we stay or whether we go.
Why are you frightened of that, John?
Because I don't think the result will be terribly different. I think that our other guest there is not a good mathematician. 2 and 2 don't make 63. Which he's adding up. People in Jaywick on Sands weren't influenced by Russian people hacking into their Twitter account. That I can promise him. And just to dismiss Article 24, a WTO agreement ratified by 200 countries in the world is just kind of a ridiculous shorthand. I think the fact is that not many people have changed their mind.
Actually, it was ratified by 164 countries.
Well, not 200. Right, I'm a liar.
Secondly, Article 24 was designed for a breakup of a country. Like, for example, when the Velvet Revolution, when Czechoslovakia broke up and became the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic, they were previously trading on an existing basis. You're talking about Article 24 in relation to the United Kingdom leaving an existing trade bloc of the EU 27. It also does not help us with the other 60 countries around the world where we also enjoy EU trade agreements. They will not roll over. That's categorical. There are no political declarations from any single country anywhere in the world that says we will roll over your existing trade deal that you had with us before while you were EU members. Not a single one. Liam Fox has been around the world twice. He's been back and forth to Geneva at the WTO 8 times in the last 2 years, and he hasn't got a single piece of paper from any country committing to roll over a trade deal or even start negotiating a new trade deal with the United Kingdom.
With respect, that's
not a single one.
But that's because EU rules don't allow you to. Part of the dreadful way the EU is set up.
You're wrong. I'm sorry, you're wrong again.
No, but
you're talking rubbish again. Listen,
you just talk over me.
I will just talk over you for a second if you're going to talk rubbish. The fact is, you can have a discussion with another country and you can get a political declaration saying, when you leave the European Union, we would like to discuss a trade deal with you, and here's the heads of terms. In exactly the same way, we've got the 26-page political declaration from the European Union. You can do that now. So if you're going to talk normal facts, I'm happy to let you speak.
Well, I think anybody who, like me, isn't sure about the EU, or people like you, just listening to you, you understand why we voted the way we did. because actually you're not interested in somebody else's opinion, or even more to the point, the
No,
will of what somebody else wants to do.
I'm not interested in fantasy opinions. I'm interested in facts and actual reality. That's what I'm interested in. And I'm not getting that from you.
No, it's not a case of fantasy opinion. One way or another, I believe that most people voted emotionally and not economically because they don't like what the EU stands for. And actually, to suggest that, as you did, I think is quite a good analogy, that the breakup of Czechoslovakia and the breakup of England, or UK rather, coming out of the EU is quite similar in a way. People who were held in a bloc that was undemocratically run.
Well, it's a very, very different situation because they had a legal decision. Our decision to leave the European Union in that referendum in 2016 has been proven to be illegal. It's broken
No, it
electoral
hasn't
law.
been proven to be illegal at all.
Every single campaign group, official campaign group.
Can I just jump in, because I'd like us just to get back to the core issue in terms of what the right democratic thing to do now is. Jason has illustrated, John, all of the various reasons why he believes the first referendum was flawed, and that's why he thinks another referendum, a properly run referendum with no lies, is what the country needs to make the best democratic decision. If you, as you said a couple of minutes ago, if you're right that the result would be the same, then what's the problem? I mean, ultimately, you'll get what you want anyway, so why are you afraid of that?
Oh, I'm not afraid of it, but it prolongs the uncertainty. We saw Andrew Marr's show yesterday. Jeremy Corbyn, it was terrifying. He doesn't really have an idea or a policy. I think that Theresa May would probably narrowly win another general election. And I think you'd be in the same impasse as we are now. The fact of the matter is that the country is divided, and somewhere a decision has to be made. And I just, you run another election, what happens in 18 months if it's exactly the same result as we're in now? It's just been more uncertainty.
Well, and that's a good point, isn't it, Jason? I mean, what happens if another referendum is run and it's exactly the same result?
Well, one of the issues we had with the last referendum is the referendum bill or referendum act itself wasn't binding on the government. The government did not have to, was not bound by the result of the referendum. When we have the next one, once we've had a legal, fair debate about the actual facts of the matter, not pack of lies, then in that referendum bill that goes through Parliament, it should be binding on whatever the government of the day, whoever that happens to be. And I tend to agree that Jeremy Corbyn's got no chance whatsoever. But, I mean, the point is, in that referendum bill, you have, this is what the question is going to be. This is the franchise. We will let 16 to 18-year-olds vote, or we won't. We will let British expats who are living and working in other EU 27 countries, we'll let them vote or not. We will decide the date of the referendum. And in that act, it has to be legally binding on the government so that we don't have all this uncertainty. Whatever the result is, then we do it.
I just can't accept that, because the most important thing, whether it was legally written or not, this country believed the Prime Minister of the day that the government would listen to the people and the result of the referendum. It was actually one of the most overwhelming votes by Parliament to pass the referendum bill. It was
the thing about parliamentary sovereignty. The thing about parliamentary sovereignty is that no government can be bound by a previous government. So whatever happened historically, Parliament is sovereign. It always has been. The government's own white paper said that. We've never lost our sovereignty. And one of the principles of parliamentary sovereignty is that the Parliament of the day is not bound by decisions of previous governments. Okay. So going back 3 or 4 years is just silly.
John, thank you very much for your time. John Conway, who's the Vote Leave coordinator for South Buckinghamshire. Thank you for your time. Jason, if you could stick around for a few minutes, I'd appreciate it, because on the other line now is Stuart Agnew, who is a UKIP MEP. He covers this area in the east of England. Good morning to you, Stuart.
Yes, hello, and I will be on a train going into a tunnel in the very near future.
Right, we'll see how much
if
we
you
can
lose me. That's why
we'll see how much we can get from you then. So, as we just heard, the argument from John Conway was that he couldn't have ever foreseen that he would say this, but he now thinks the most democratic thing to happen would be for us to all get behind Theresa May's deal and for her deal to go through. Do you agree?
Well, her deal actually contains something that he's strongly opposed to, and that is no government can bind a future government, and her deal says exactly that it will bind future governments.
Well, he has said that he doesn't think it's a very.
Unaware of that. Yeah.
He says he doesn't think it's a very good deal, but he does feel as if the alternative now is for us not to leave. So he'd rather have Theresa May's deal than to have what Jason Hunter is suggesting, another referendum where the chances are Remain would win.
Well, I have to disagree with him that we should be having another referendum. We shouldn't. We've had a referendum, and we should abide by the result of that, which was to leave the European Union. And that means repealing the article, and we leave,
Why are you saying, oh dear, Jason?
I'm sorry, I just find it a little bit ironic. We're talking about somebody from UKIP. They've had like 7 leadership elections because they didn't like the leader they had. So they had another vote, and then they had another vote, and then they had a different leader, and then they had a different leader. So for anybody from UKIP to say, oh no, we've had a vote, so we should stand by it, if they did, they'd still have Nigel Farage as their leader. The irony is brilliant.
Well, I think that's utter nonsense. He resigned. He's allowed to resign. Other leaders have resigned. They're allowed to resign. And when they resign, we go through a process. It's quite straightforward. But what he was talking about earlier...
But you do get the point, Stuart, that Jason is making. In all other areas of our democracy, we see that there are times where we will vote or that another vote will be given. For example, recently, before Christmas, there was the challenge to Theresa May, the vote of no confidence. The Conservative Party got to vote on whether they had confidence in the Prime Minister. They got to vote on her again. Now, she'd been elected 2 years before, but those Conservative MPs had the opportunity to think again and to make a decision as to whether they wanted to keep her or not. Why is it okay for the politicians to get these various votes, and yet you don't want us to have the vote again?
The answer is very simple. They followed their own rules of the Conservative Party. If they're dissatisfied with the Prime Minister, that is what they do. We hold very occasionally referendums in this country, and where Parliament gives the decision to the people, and if the people make a decision, Parliament cannot go back on it. This is the real problem here. They are not... They were elected, these politicians, all of them in their manifestos, Labour Conservative, said they would adhere to the results of the referendum. They said that.
So, Stuart, you would like the Prime Minister's plan, her deal, to be voted down tomorrow night, yes?
Yes.
And then what?
It isn't a proper break.
And then what?
The European Union.
And then what?
Then she leaves the European Union without a deal. During the referendum campaign, there was no discussion on whether there should be a deal or not.
Are you suggesting that over 17 million people voted for us to leave the European Union with no deal?
Yes, that was never part of the question.
No.
The European Union.
No. Stuart, many people on the Leave side of the campaign said that we would get a free trade deal very easily with the European Union, so there was nothing to fear from voting Leave.
And I actually think that's still possible. If we leave without a deal, I think a deal will be forthcoming within a year. Once all the posturing is back down, it boils down to this. It's the number of people in the European Union whose livelihoods depend on exporting to Britain. There's a much smaller number of people here whose livelihoods depend on exporting to the European Union. The voices of these people here and abroad are not being listened to. These are the people who really count. And if we leave without a deal, there is no reason why we can't get a subsequent deal having left. None at all.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Stuart Agnew, UKIP MEP. Thank you as well to Jason Hunter, who's a former international trade negotiator. Is Stuart right? What he just said there, that over 17 million people voted for us to leave the European Union without a deal. Is that right? If you voted Leave, did you vote Leave on the basis that we would not get any kind of deal with the EU at all? Or did you vote Leave because people like Michael Gove, people like Liam Fox said not to worry, we would easily get a free trade deal. There was really nothing to fear from voting to leave. The day after we voted to leave, the EU would be falling over themselves to offer us a deal. Maybe that's why you voted Leave and you don't agree with Stuart's summary of your intentions. 08081 008800. What do you think would be the most democratic thing to happen to Brexit now? Sir Vince Cable is the leader.